Brethren, good morning. I'm saying good morning from where we are, even in the central time zone. You may be listening later, but happy fourth day of the Feast of Tabernacles for 2015. We promised you yesterday when the media player didn't work that we would open up with some words from Sam Smitherman, who's traveling with me. Today we'll be leaving Alabama, heading down to Florida, one of the beaches there, and we're looking forward to that. We got a special hymn related to something I'll tell you about a little later. Let me just say welcome again to the fourth day of the feast. For those of you tuning in here on cogtv.org via sabbath.tv, the website easiest to go to get our signal, sabbath.tv. I think that's easiest maybe for a smartphone. And it may be smart enough to know you're watching from a desktop web page too, I believe. Hope so. Otherwise, you get our live video signal through cogtv.org and the tab up above that says video live stream. Now, what do we have? We got Sam going to open up, and we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday with the Correspondence course, 58-volume edition, lesson 38 on Feast of Tabernacles. Our media player hung up on us yesterday, and we're just going to pick up right from where that left off. Let's go first to Sam. Listen. Today, by the way, on the pagan Roman calendar is October 1st. We're still forced to use, relating to this world, the old pagan Roman calendar. Once Jesus Christ returns to this earth and ushers in and restores the kingdom of God, thankfully, we'll have one calendar, and it'll be God's sacred calendar, what we know now as the Hebrew calendar. That'll be the one worldwide calendar, the calendar for the whole world. One government, one calendar. No dysfunctionalism, and it'll be the calendar based on the moon, and we'll have government under the Melchizedek priesthood with Levitical priesthood restored. We'll be doing the new moons at that time, once we're under a civil government that, goes hand in hand, kings and priests. And you'll be able to observe from Israel the calculated calendar working out from the sky, because God works it both ways. And today we're a little short on a few things today because man has rejected God and decided to, even ancient Israel decided to pick its own king. And the God of this world is still on the throne too, and so he has a great influence over the world and over the world's leaders. Now, you see behind me on the screen, Sam. Let's go to Sam, and then I'll come back and we'll introduce the Correspondence course and where we're picking up on that. All right, Sam Smitherman. He's from Vance, California. He's legally blind. He's been in the church since Carn Catherwood and Gerald Waterhouse came to Birmingham on a baptizing tour in 1962. And so he's one of the early birds for the church in the South and Alabama. Knows most of the brethren here, has got their phone numbers, stays in contact and touch with a lot of them, well loved, and has helped me rejoice during this first half of the feast so far. And Sam, in 2012 now, he was with me and Dan Listen, Dan who's helping me with the Correspondence course you're listening to, if you're tuning in listening to that every day. Dan did that with me on that same trip we did through Alabama over to Florida last year. Not last year, 3 years ago in 2012. And Dan helped me with the Correspondence course. Sam did a little sermonette. I'm just picking an excerpt from Sam's sermonette where he's mentioning something from a sermonette he had heard before about how God helps us in a certain way. God actually carries more of our burdens and trials than we have to carry, especially if we pitch him for it. We may have to still do our part and stand up against adversaries and enemies, but God helps us more than we're able to help ourselves. Although he lets us have a part in it and share some of the glory by standing firm and building character, building spiritual muscle which God wants to see us do. He doesn't want any more Lucifers turned Satan through eternity, especially as he gives sonship to beings he's created from the dust of the ground, starting with Adam, and then the rest of us were born from Adam and Eve. And we have an opportunity to yet be born when we're transformed from flesh into spirit at the return of Christ. Yahoo! Something to rejoice about and be excited about. All right, let's hear a few words from Sam Smitherman. Some of you I know have been praying for Sam. He was ill a few days ago. We've had to wait until today before we could leave and drive down to Florida. And so here's a few for your prayers. We appreciate that. Here's for you to get to know Sam a little bit better. Those of you who've been praying for him, we ask you to keep praying for him. He's down taking a nap right now. But this is a recording from 2012. Let me bring him forward here so you can see his smiling mug. And then we'll start this. Sam, it's all yours.
I was on the scene one day several years back, and a man was taking the fish out of one lake and putting them in another lake, and he had a long handled seine, a long handled dip net, and it was all he could do to carry those fish and put them in the other lake. Well, I walked up on the scene and I said, well, look here. It's got two little handles on the other end of the net. And I said, you let me start helping you, and I'll take the short end of the net, and you take the long end of the net. And I said, that's the way God does it for us in our problems. He takes the long end of the stick, and we take the short end of the stick. And that way it equals it up, so we can do it together. And a little bit, he said, you make sense to me. He said, it don't. I said, I never thought of things like this.
Okay. Thank you, Sam Smitherman, for sharing that with us here during this feast by recording from 2012, during this feast for 2015, on the fourth day of the feast this year. Sam, you know how they say, people take their picture with your camera and you smile and they take your picture, you break their camera. You just crashed my video player here, Sam. I'm just playing with Sam. Sam will be watching this later, so we're going to have to, let's see, what do I do? Hit that button right there. Yeah, all right. Now, that means while I'm talking to you, friends, let me put another shot up on here on the screen, and let me reopen our video player, because next we're going to go to the correspondence course where we left off last year, and then I have a hymn we're going to end with today that I hope you'll all sing along with. It shows some of the blessing that relates to some of the great blessings that God has given to us all around the world, but especially in the UK and in the United States. And I'll tell you what that hymn is later, and we'll all sing it toward the end if everything continues to work properly and doesn't hang up on us here with our video player. Okay, now let me reload everything that we need to finish up with. Doing a live stream, things can happen, and I appreciate those of you who actually watch live. By the way, we're still doing this early. If you're watching this later in the day, or especially from recording from the archive, I got up early and we did this again early in the morning. Even Central Time, Alabama, feels awfully early, 7:30 a.m. Pacific Time, only 9:30 a.m. California time, but I'm not used to starting these live streams at this time, although we are starting to do that on the Sabbaths and the holy days, because people in the UK are wanting to watch while it's still Sabbath, before the sun goes down on the Sabbath. So we've opened up earlier time, and I've gotten into a practice of doing that, and I've noticed some of you have been watching live, because we get a report that tells us where the IP addresses are from which people watch live. It doesn't tell us any more than your city or general area by the IP address. but we at least know, people from UK have been watching live, so my getting up early is, what's the word to use, is being utilized, appreciated, and I appreciate that. Okay, now I've almost got this stuff reloaded. I'm going to see if I can read. That one seemed to hang us up. And on this particular player, I have to do something that makes the order of this stuff reverse. I'm going to see if I can pick it up in a way that, well, I only picked up one. Just bear with me, if you will. It'll only take me at most another minute, I think, as long as it'll hang in there and not hang up on us again. All right, now, if I can select this one and all the rest of these down to here. Yeah. All right. We'll bypass that one that may have broke the camera, hung us up there, Sam. Not your fault, really. I think it's more that video. All right, let's go back over here. And we've got the recording ready where we left off yesterday with the Correspondence course, lesson 38 from the 58-volume edition. We covered one or two sections yesterday. We're going to pick up from, I think, about the third section in where we left off yesterday. We'll roll for a good 45 minutes or so, and then we'll stop and pick up again, sing a hymn, and then we'll pick up from wherever we leave off here. We'll pick up tomorrow. Now, I was doing this with Sam, well, not Sam, but with Dan Listen from a secret location that Dan and I drove to in Florida where we broadcast live, and we traveled several places through Florida, and we gave clues as to where we're going. So when you hear one of us make reference to our secret location, that's what we were doing in 2012. That was 3 years ago, and so let's pick up where we left off. Correspondence course, lesson 38 on the Feast of Tabernacles, giving the basics, the rudiments of what this feast is about, which, while we're scattered, brethren, I've been praying and asking God what to do during this feast, and it's come back. Be sure the brethren understand the basics, the rudiments of what this feast is about. Meat in due season. Not going off in a lot of sugar candy or cake icing, right down to the basic rudiments of what this feast is about. While we're scattered, we really need to be undergirded, really have our foundation on the basics and the rudiments really well rooted in us. So even if you think you know all of this, as some of the questions come up, before the answers come up, see if you know the answer. And then say, oh, yeah, I better pay attention to that and make sure I know these basics, these rudiments. So here we go. Where we picked up from, where we left off yesterday, we'll pick up here in lesson 38. Old Testament Israel failed to keep it. Question 1. Where was the place that God originally set his name, designating it as the place the Feast of Tabernacles was to be kept? And for the answer to that, we're going to Joshua 18 and verse 1.
Verse 1, and the whole congregation of the children of Israel assembled together at Shiloh and set up the tabernacle of the congregation there, and the land was subdued before them.
And the second part of this same question is, were some of the children of Israel obedient? And we'll be going to Joshua 21, verse 19 for this, the answer to this question. Were some of the children of Israel obedient at that time in keeping the feast? Judges 21, I think I may have said Joshua, but I meant to say Judges 21, verse 19.
Then they said, behold, there is a feast of the Lord in Shiloh, yearly, in a place which is on the north side of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goeth up from Bethel to Shechem, and on the south of Lebonah.
And we'll go to verse 21 in Judges 21 for the next part of this question, which says, and in rejoicing, and that's tagging on to the question, were some of the children of Israel obedient at that time in keeping the feast and in rejoicing? Verse 21.
Verse 21, and see, and behold, if the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in dances, then come ye out of the vineyards, and catch you every man his wife of the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin.
Well, excuse me, brother, we're going to end the broadcast early today. Dan and I are heading to Shiloh. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. We're staying in our secret location here in Florida. And on to question 2 in this section. Were the parents of Samuel, who became one of God's greatest prophets, always obedient in keeping this feast every year? 1 Samuel 1, verses 3, and we'll go to 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 19. But first, 1 Samuel 1, verse 3, for the answer to the question, were the parents of Samuel, who became one of God's greatest prophets, always obedient in keeping this feast every year? Verse 3, 1 Samuel 1.
Verse 3, and this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there.
And then verse 21 of 1 Samuel 1.
Verse 21, and the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer unto the Lord the yearly sacrifice and his vow.
And then chapter 2 of 1 Samuel and verse 19.
Verse 19, moreover, his mother made him a little coat and brought it to him from year to year when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice.
Now question 3. Okay, brethren, right there the video player hung up. I'm aware of that. So what we did, I'm not sure what happened. Okay, all right, let me stop that. Let me come back here with you on screen for a moment. Hey, what's happening here? Oh, I'm on the wrong. Okay, we're live. All right. Now let me roll this to the next section where we can pick up where that one left off. Okay, I think we've got it. And then make sure that's in the right place. Okay, here we go. Let's go back. We'll just pick right up where that cut off. Old Testament Israel failed to keep it. Question 1. Okay, all right. Where was the place that God originally set? All right, I'm replaying the one we just played, so let me stop that, and let's go to the next one. All right, what's happening? How come we're getting these? Oh, I've got... Brethren, I think we may have repeated what we played yesterday, and so we'll pick up where that left off from right now yesterday. Since we're live, we just got to keep going. So let's pick it up from where that video just cut off and pick up here. Old Testament Israel failed to keep it. Okay, all right, I see what happened. I've got that in there twice. So we'll just go to this one where it picks up from where that left off. All right, now we should be squared away. We're picking up with question 3 from the section entitled Old Testament Israel Failed to Keep It. Three of this section. Did God later change the location for the Feast of Tabernacles, and in the early years of King Solomon have a temple built there? We'll go to the 1 Kings 8 for the answer to this, and we'll look to verses 1 and 2. Did God later change the location for the Feast of Tabernacles, and in the early years of King Solomon have a temple built there? 1 Kings 8.
Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes to the chief of the fathers of the children of Israel unto King Solomon in Jerusalem, that they might bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion, themselves unto King Solomon at the feast in the month of Ethanim, which is the 7th month.
Did Solomon call the people early to the feast to spend a week in dedicating the newly finished temple? Verse 65.
Verse 65, and at that time Solomon held a feast, and all Israel with him, a great congregation, from the entering in of Hamath unto the river of Egypt before the Lord our God, 7 days, and 7 days, even 14 days.
And question 4 in this section. But had Israel ever completely filled God's instructions concerning the Feast of Tabernacles after the death of the one generation who personally witnessed God's miracles? We're going to Nehemiah 8 and verse 17 for the answer to this question. But had Israel ever completely fulfilled God's instructions concerning the Feast of Tabernacles after the death of the one generation who personally witnessed God's miracles?
Verse 17, and all the congregation of them that were come out of the captivity made booths, and sat under the booths, for since the day of Jeshua, the son of Nun, unto that day, had not the children of Israel done so, and there was very great gladness.
And question 5, what did wicked King Jeroboam do after his successful rebellion against Solomon's son? And we'll turn to 1 Kings 12 for the answer to this question. What did wicked King Jeroboam do after his successful rebellion against Solomon's son? That would be Solomon's son Rehoboam. 1 Kings 12, verse 32.
Verse 32, and Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah, and he offered upon the altar. So did he in Bethel, sacrificing unto the calves that he had made. And he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made.
And this question continues, did he assume that where God's days were kept didn't really make any difference? And the Correspondence course has a comment here to answer that. Jeroboam's action was normal for carnal-minded people everywhere. They don't know who or what God really is. Jeroboam's conception of how to worship the true God was merely his own man-devised idea. And there's a parenthetical reference to verse 33. The course now asks us to be sure to read the whole passage from 1 Kings 12, 26 to the end of the 13th chapter. The 13th chapter revealing how God mercifully gave Jeroboam further instruction backed up by a series of miracles, verses 3, 4, and 6, and a further opportunity to repent, verse 6. But Jeroboam did not repent of counterfeit religion, verse 33, and he suffered the penalty, verse 34. Now, question 6 in this section of the Correspondence course, why did God finally cause Israel and Judah to be summarily deported to foreign lands? Ezekiel 20, and we'll look at a whole string of verses there, beginning with verse 13. We'll look at verse 13, 16, 20, 21, 24, and 34. We'll start with verse 13 of Ezekiel 20.
Verse 13, but the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They walked not in my statutes, and they despised my judgments, which if a man do, he shall even live in them. And my Sabbaths they greatly polluted. Then I said, I would pour out my fury upon them in the wilderness to consume them.
And verse 16.
Verse 16, because they despised my judgments and walked not in my statutes, but polluted my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols.
Verse 20 and 21.
Verses 20 and 21, and hallow my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, that ye may know that I am the Lord your God. Notwithstanding, the children rebelled against me. They walked not in my statutes, neither kept my judgments to do them. Which, if a man do, he shall even live in them. They polluted my Sabbaths. Then I said, I would pour out my fury upon them, to accomplish my anger against them in the wilderness.
Verse 24.
Verse 24, because they had not executed my judgments, but had despised my statutes, and had polluted my Sabbaths, and their eyes were after their fathers' idols.
And verse 34.
And verse 34, and I will bring you out from the people, and will gather you out of the countries wherein ye are scattered, with a mighty hand, and with a stretched out arm, and with fury poured out.
And of course, asks us to notice that Sabbaths is plural, speaking of annual Sabbaths as well as the weekly Sabbaths. The annual Sabbaths as well as the weekly Sabbath. The Bible always speaks of the weekly Sabbath in the singular. And then a comment, for long continued disobedience, chiefly their utter disregard of God's weekly and annual Sabbaths, they were transported into slavery. It is these days, brethren, that point the way to salvation. Those who refuse to keep God's holy days soon forget the true God. They soon forget the true God. At length, God swore in his wrath, quote, with a stretched out arm and with fury poured out will I rule over you, and I will bring you out from the people, and will gather you out of the countries wherein you are scattered. And you shall know that I am the Lord when I shall bring you, parenthesis, again, still today in the future, when I shall bring you into the land of Israel, into the country for the which I lifted up mine hand to give it to your fathers. And that in the correspondence course from parenthesis Ezekiel 20 verses 33 through 34 and verse 42. And a photo, inset photo, has a cap. Friends, before we go to that photo insert there, I'm jumping back in here just for a moment, because what was just read in this correspondence course, even though it relates to the future when God is gathering all of the physical nations, the tribes, all the physical tribes of Israel, regathering them to Israel. After Christ is returned, it principally in, what's the word to use? As an analogy or as a type, it could also be that the next time that we all wind up gathered together as one body again. Right now we are scattered. I know there are many people that are in this group or that group that feel like, oh yeah, we are united. I don't mean to actually use that word. Let's see, we are, one body. There's no other brethren. Well, if you take that attitude, you're forgetting about, there's 600,000-800,000 other groups, some of them of reasonable size, and some of them, some few of a reasonable size, and some many of just little small chunks of people here and there that are all divided up. And their ministers have created banana peelings or groups, or in other words, banana peeling Church of Gods, or adjectives. They put an adjective with the name of God's church, the Church of God. They've put an adjective before or after it. Mr. Armstrong did that to designate the corporate aspect and the time of the Philadelphia era and where it is. It started out as mostly a radio church in the beginning, kind of, a lot of radio audience people. God pulled brethren through radio, and then as it grew into a worldwide big body, he renamed the corporate part of it Worldwide Church of God. And then the administrators that came in after Mr. Armstrong, whom God put in office through Mr. Armstrong's hands, at least one of them, the first one, who went apostate on us, and then they changed and did away with the name. They didn't truly hold the name even while they had the name, and they still use it to collect some tithe money now. But and there's some brethren who still continue to send in a tithe check to Worldwide Church of God. And I'm not criticizing anybody. We all have to answer to God. We all pray, fast, ask God what to do, and we listen to the response God gives us. But on this thing about when we're all finally gathered together as one body, and I realize the true members of Christ right now, or the true members of the body of Christ right now, are maybe like God's Word, here a little, there a little, there, here and there. We are definitely scattered. And the time when God will bring us back together now there are some of my friends even, who one of them worked in letter answering, and he believes God is yet going to bring us back under one candlestick before we go to the place of safety. Personally, I don't see that happening. I kind of see that what God's talking about here, about the gathering together and taking us to Israel, to the Middle East, Israel, over there next to Jordan, or actually next to Israel is where you take us. Take us into that triangulated area that Daniel 11, verses 40, 41, 42 speaks about, which is the only area on the face of the earth that the beast does not have reach or get into. It's the only protected area on the face of the earth. The land of the children of Ammon, Moab, and Edom is what it says, what God says there through Daniel in chapter 11 of Daniel 11, verses 40, 41, 42. So it looks like the place of protection, of nourishment, of final training, of safety is going to be right there on the east side of that river, that waterway that runs down from the Lake of Tiberias to the Dead Sea. And just east of there, that land in Jordan, all of that's protected. That happens to be where Petra is, and whether it actually is Petra God takes us or somewhere in that area. Mr. Armstrong stayed in a cave overnight in Petra, and he said after doing that, he hopes it's not Petra because it wasn't exactly like staying in a Hilton hotel. Far from it. And so anyway, but it could be, the principle in this part of the course could be that the next time we're all together as one body may be when those who are accounted worthy to escape and that are considered to be part of the Philadelphia era are taken by God on the two wings of an eagle to a place of nourishment, protection, safety, final training. That may be the next time we're all gathered together as one body again. Now we're one body scattered. Some here, some there. And, we have to live with that. Unless you can change it through prayer and fasting, and God does something different than I think He's going to do. I think He's not going to regather us into one body until it's time to escape. And those who are accounted worthy to escape are brought as one body into that protected area over in the Middle East, where God will protect us for 3.5 years from the beast. That's my thoughts on it. Okay, let's go back to the correspondence course.
Action that reads, Jeroboam set up pagan altars at Dan and Bethel to lead Israel away from keeping the Feast of Tabernacles in Jerusalem. Now, question 7 of this section. Had the pitifully small remnant of Jews who returned from Babylon under Ezra and Nehemiah learned that He is the Lord? Nehemiah 8, verse 1.
Verse 1, And all the people gathered themselves together as one man into the street that was before the water gate, and they spake unto Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had commanded to Israel.
And a comment right there following that in the correspondence course, brethren, is after 70 years of captivity, God had become real to those few Jews. They now knew He was really God, who had promised happiness, abundance, and continued rejoicing for obedience. and had vividly pictured for them in the same book of the law curses and wretchedness to follow disobedience. Deuteronomy 28 for that. Question 8 now, did they immediately begin to keep God's holy days? Nehemiah 8, verses 2, 14, and 18.
Verse 2, and Ezra the priest brought the law before the congregation, both of men and women, and all that could hear with understanding upon the first day of the 7th month.
Verse 14.
Verse 14, and they found written in the law, which the Lord had commanded by Moses, that the children of Israel should dwell in booths in the feast of the 7th month.
And verse 18.
Verse 18, also, day by day, from the first day until the last day, he read in the book of the law of God, and they kept the feast 7 days. And on the 8th day was a solemn assembly according to unto the manner.
And the next part of that question asks, and did they immediately set about learning the laws of God, which, if kept, would bring about peace, happiness, and prosperity? Nehemiah 8, verse 18.
Verse 18, yea, when they had made them a molten calf, and said, this is thy God that brought thee up out of Egypt, and had wrought great provocations.
I think Dan may have read the wrong verse here. Also day by day, from the first day unto the last day, he read in the book of the law of God, and they kept the feast 7 days, and on the 8th day was a solemn assembly according unto the manner.
11.
Verse 10, and Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, in the solemnity of the year of the release, in the Feast of Tabernacles, verse 11, when all Israel is come to appear before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose, thou shalt read this law before all Israel in their hearing.
And at this next point in the correspondence course is a photo which has a picture of Dan. Now, not the Dan sitting next to me reading these scriptures to you, but the city of Dan and Bethel, the areas where Jeroboam placed his golden calves. And then there's that following that is a comment. Because of personal experience, the holy days now held graphic meaning for the few thousand Jews who returned from captivity. Their eyes were open, symbolic of the world's people after the second coming of Christ. And now the next section, and then Brethren, we'll just do this section, and then we're going to break and ask you to do what we plan to do, go out and rejoice somewhere and doing something you really enjoy doing, that we're able to do during this festival time. And then we'll continue after this section tomorrow. The first question in this section is, during Jesus Christ's life as a man, were some of the descendants of the returned Jews still faithfully keeping the Feast of Tabernacles? John 7, verse 2.
Okay, friends, and as we broke off right there, we'll, as we said in that recording, that's exactly what we'll do tomorrow. We'll pick up from that point with with our next transmission. Because what I think we'll do is, how oftentimes during the feast we've had a day off where we do family day, and that's been done at some feast sites where we, be sure you're with your family tomorrow. So we may do that tomorrow because of my traveling from Alabama to Florida with Sam Smitherman, who you heard at the opening today. And so our next time may be Sabbath. You can check to see if we're on tomorrow. And if we're here, we're here. And if we're not, we'll be back here Sabbath. But next time, we'll pick up where this correspondence course left off, so that during this feast this year, we're going through, as God answered my prayer, what to do. We're going through the basics, the rudiments of what the Feast of Tabernacles is all about, and the details of it. You're getting a lot of details. Now, I promised you we'd do a hymn. We'll probably save this one till tomorrow or Sabbath. And today, though, there's one I'd like to do. Let's see. Do we have it? Oh, it's here. It's just in a different order. Let's back it up to here. Okay, because I'm being a little selfish in doing this, because I'm traveling today and we'll be seeing a lot of beautiful sights through the country. And some of you did that already as you traveled to the feast site where you are. Some of you that are at home, maybe today, tomorrow, get out in your car, drive to some beautiful place, be with your family some, and really let God know how we've appreciated the blessings that He's given us here in the United States, with the blessing to Manasseh, to one of the sons of Joseph, who was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, and how we recognize that God gave this country to us as a blessing. Which brings to mind a scripture. I can't tell you exactly where it is at the moment. Some of you will know it. You can look it up in electronic concordance that tells people of a country to not put a foreigner over them as their leader. And don't have a foreigner as your leader. And that's one of the big sins and mistakes that this country has made, and we're beginning to witness why God said that. We're beginning to witness the consequences of disobeying God in that specifically. We're also recognizing in this country many of the consequences of just generally disobeying God. And as God says in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, the two blessing and cursing chapters, He tells people individually and collectively as a nation that if you obey me, that's what He starts out in the beginning of both those two chapters, Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28. If you diligently hearken to my voice, if you obey my commands, my judgments, my statutes, then I'll bless you. And He enumerates the blessings. In verse 4 of Leviticus 26, He says, I'll give you rain in due season. So we wouldn't be seeing what we've been seeing in Mobile, Alabama the last couple of days, where it's just rained solid for 2 days straight and caused a lot of flooding. We wouldn't be seeing what's been happening for the past many months and several years in California that has caused wildfires that have still not been put out or extinguished, to be raging and rampaging many areas and burning homes and putting many firefighters in danger and having killed some people. We wouldn't be seeing that kind of wildfire situation because of extreme drought in California. If we had rain in due season, God would be giving the right amount of rain, not so little that there's huge drought like on the West Coast, California, as I just mentioned, and not too much so that there's flooding like presently happening down in Mobile, Alabama, and that Gulf area, and perhaps other places too, as we check the world news. Rain in due season, tremendous blessing, and that also means those of you who have fruit trees in the backyard, God will give you just the right amount so your trees won't become brittle and the bad bugs eat them up, or that they won't have so much rain that they mildew, and again, bad bugs. And God would give just the right amount of rain. Your fruit trees in your backyard, if you're growing any, would be well blessed and fruitful. And collectively as a nation, He says, if you obey me, I'll make you the head, not the tail. I'll make you the lender, not the borrower. He says, 5 of you will chase 100 of your enemies. 100 of you will put 10,000 of your enemies to flight. And so what's happening to the United States? Take a look at the one that says, I'll make you the lender, not the borrower. That should be a huge red flag that the United States is not being blessed. We keep raising our debt ceiling as we keep borrowing more money. We are the borrower, not the lender, and yet we borrow and give away money like an idiot to buying our lovers, as God puts it. Which a filthy way to do it. And it's going to come back on our head, because once we're not able to buy off our lovers, they're not true lovers. You know, they're enemies in disguise. As long as you're paying them off, they'll hold back. Just keep paying us. But at some point, they're going to react. And weak leadership causing the whole Middle East, the security, the relative peace that was there for a long time is being terribly, terribly undermined. Israel in terrible situation, trouble. But we've had blessings in this country. They may be being taken away, but up to this point, we've had them pretty well. And we can sing about that. And let's do that together as we sing this hymn entitled America the Beautiful. And it's based on Deuteronomy 8, verse 7. You might want to take a full look at that verse. It's with piano accompaniment. Let's sing it together, brethren, and we'll close up for today. America the Beautiful. America the Beautiful. Their country love and mercy more than life. America, America, God men that gold refine, till all success be nobleness and every grace divine. Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years, line alabaster cities gleam undimmed by human tears. America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Hey, brothers, thank you for singing along with me there, and pardon my silliness at the end. And brethren, that's it for this day 4 of the Feast of Tabernacles 2015. You know, that puts us 4-7. Feast of Tabernacles wise, you know, the last great day, the 8th day, is a separate feast. So we're 4/7 along the way through the millennium is what this 4th day of the feast pictures. So we're a little more than 500 years. We're past the 500-year mark into the millennium at this point, day 4, during this Feast of Tabernacles 2015. I remember when Robin Weber said that to us at a feast in Pasadena one year. And he was just, each day, he would figure how far along we were into the millennium as this day pictures our being in the millennium. That was just a fun way to think about it. We're now a little past 500 years into the millennium. That ought to be a pretty peaceful time for us. And so I hope this feast for you is going that way, and I hope you're getting these basics we're going through now from the Correspondence course on the Feast of Tabernacles. And let me sign off. If you don't find us here tomorrow because of my traveling with Sam down to Florida, please try to spend some extra time, do some extra special things with your family, use the time for preparation for the weekly Sabbath, or even during this Feast of Tabernacles, and it's picturing the time when we'll have Sabbaths, weekly Sabbaths during the millennium. So, and the day before, day 6 of the week, will always be preparation day for that weekly Sabbath. So prepare extra for the Sabbath. Have a great Sabbath. We may be here tomorrow for a little bit, but if we're not, use it with your family. Use it to really prepare for the weekly Sabbath, and we will do our best to be back here at least for the weekly Sabbath, and fellowship with you from our remote location in Florida. Or maybe I'll do something before we leave even. Okay, thank you for joining me here on day 4, representing a little more than 500 years. We're past 500 years into the millennium at this point during the Feast of Tabernacles for 2015. All right, until tomorrow, friends, this is Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath saying, have a great rest of the day during the feast. Do something where you really are rejoicing, something that really makes you happy and that you can really rejoice with others around you. And until next time, I'll say Chag Sameach, happy feast, wherever you are.